Thank you for joining us today. My name is Karen Robertson. I am the Director of Fair Education for Schools Plus Australia. And also,
good afternoon, I'm Emma Davidson. I'm the Program Manager for Fair Ed in South Wales.
Thank you once again for joining us. This webinar is for schools interested in applying for a Schools Plus Fair Education grant in our current grant round. And today will be an opportunity for you to gain some insight, not only of the work of Schools Plus, but especially around the Fair Education program. And so our aim this afternoon is to provide you with the information to assist you as either an individual school or as a cluster of schools, how to apply for a grant, but especially to see that you meet the criteria of the program, or if there are further questions that you'd like to ask about the program, then you'll have that opportunity as well. Before we start, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of our land on which we work and live. We are on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and we recognise their continuing connection to the land, the water and the community. We pay our respects to the elders of the past, the present and emerging. And as we acknowledge the land on which we stand, we would also like participants this afternoon to acknowledge the land on which they stand. So in the chat this afternoon, if you'd like to nominate where you are and on which land you stand, we are really interested in knowing where our schools are, and we welcome them this afternoon. All right, so who is Schools Plus, and a little bit more about Schools Plus for those that don't know. Schools Plus was developed in 2015, but it was in response to the Gonski Review of 2011. Our aim of School Plus is to empower schools to implement initiatives that bring about sustainable change and help to close the gaps in education. We do this by providing schools with funding, coaching and program management and evaluation tools which help to lead the projects that we fund within the schools, and we will go into that in a little bit more detail shortly. Schools Plus work, as I said, has been led by the Gonski Review of 2011, and as a recommendation from the review, it was that an organisation should be established to allow schools greater access to philanthropic support. In doing this, as I said, in 2015, fair education and smart giving programs were developed with the support of donors through and transferred and delivered through Schools Plus. So, one of the things before we go into greater detail about fair education itself and also the grant application is one of the important elements is to know whether as a school or as a cluster you are eligible to apply. And this begins with a key eligibility question for all schools within who apply for programs within Schools Plus. We need to check that here is under 1,000, and that is our index of community socio-educational advantage. And this is something that schools may or may not know in terms of reference, but it is an important factor when we are talking about applications for Schools Plus. If you're not sure if your school has an ICSEA, or if you're not sure what the value of your ICSEA is, you are able to make contact either with myschool.ed.au and have a look at your school profile there, or you can also make contact with us at Schools Plus and we can have a look at that eligibility factor for you. There are a number of schools that may not actually have an ICSEA, and that could include special schools or newly established schools, or schools that have actually been operational for less than 12 months. So once again, if you fall into that category, please make contact with us and you will have all of the additional contact details within the presentation, which we will share at the end. It is also important to know that Schools Plus works directly with schools. There is a requirement to be a school, not a not-for-profit working with a school or a PNC or any of the equivalent. And if you're not sure, again, happy to talk that through with you, but our goal is to work directly with schools. All right, so Who is and what is fair education? Well, fair education was or has some really specific goals. Our goals are these that are on the screen in front of you at the moment. And the fair education aim is to develop the capacity of school leaders in high needs schools to better engage families and communities in student learning. Our goals are about that strategic capability of school leaderships, and definitely with a focus on family and community engagement at the centre of our projects. We are looking to improve the capacity of low socioeconomic schools to work together to generate real world learning environments. And at the crux of that, our goal is to improve student learning outcomes. This has been delivered and with the support of the Vincent Fairfax Family Foundation. And with their support from the beginning, it was their vision to deliver the fair education. So in 2015, our relationship was established. The Foundation's ambition was to improve student learning outcomes by supporting school leaders and teachers in those disadvantaged areas to become more effective at engaging families and communities. Fair education itself is a multi-dimensional program, touching on topics such as strategic capability of school leadership, parent and community engagement, school collaboration, project management, and funding. But ultimately, the goal of the program is to see tangible and sustainable improvements in quality of student learning and student outcomes. What we do know is that each fair education project is designed and planned by schools based on their knowledge of their local conditions and their local challenges. School flexibility to adapt and shift the programs is really key to the successful implementation, and adjustments can be made to both respond to the changing community situations and also to allow for trial and error that are going to allow you within your schools to find the most effective solution. So initially, although we started in New South Wales, and this was in 2015, the Fair Education program has grown substantially. The first cohort in New South Wales completed their 3-year projects in 2019. And these schools are now working to sustain their engagement and engagement strategies and to embed what they've learnt into their daily practices within their schools. Additional cohorts in New South Wales were launched in 2018 and also in 2020. And with the confirmed support of VFFF, we now have the 4th cohort of schools that we are aiming to join the program for 2021. And that's the current application round that we have open at the moment. Fair education has expanded from 1 state to 3, and thanks to additional support of a number of donors, including the Tim Fairfax Family Foundation, the Brian Foundation in Queensland. Programs were started in 2019 in Queensland, and with the donors of the Ross Trust, the Ian Potter Foundation, and the Foundation for the Graduate of Early Childhood Studies in Victoria, we were able to implement, and we have 2 projects now underway in Victoria, and they started earlier this year. With the expansion of the Fair Education program across the states, though, we have taken the lessons we have learned from the implementation of those original cohorts and the projects, and we definitely have made some really strategic and key improvements. These include a more rigorous approach to the project planning and reporting to ensure that the greater impacts for students, as well as to see that there is a strong alignment between the school and the broader school plan. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail as we get into the grant application. We are also looking to ensure sustainability of the projects that are in place with the wider leadership team engagement. So, family and community engagement, as I said before, is at the centre of the work that we're doing within Fair Education. Fair Education believes that the collaboration between schools and community is a powerful tool to unlock student outcomes. Most, if not all, of our schools are located in areas where there are some challenges or even socioeconomic difficulties, and therefore community engagement is critical. for all of our projects. The main goal is for our families and communities to be willing to support students learning in and outside of school. And so far, the data that we have reported on and recorded, both externally and internally, is showing exceptionally positive results in terms of what we're seeing. So, how does the program work? Okay, it starts with inputs. Number one, the funding from our philanthropic donors, which is fantastic. So we have our funding, then our delivery model includes coaching and effective program management, tracking and evaluation. All of these elements combined together provide the foundation for change, but also set schools up for success for sustainable results. Fair education, as we know, or as we're hearing, is actually a very multidisciplinary program. And it brings together different tools to help you achieve meaningful transformation in education. On their own, each of these components are easy to use, but understanding the synergies that can be achieved when using them together is what makes Fair Education a really successful program. The timeframe is a 3-year formal partnership between Schools Plus, our coaches and our schools, whether that be individual or whether it be clusters of schools. We are committed and we have a commitment from not just our coaches, but also from our schools for coaching in each term of the project. So you will be supported through over the 3 years with a relationship that you will build with your coach. One of the strongest elements, though, is the belief, and the belief is that schools are best placed to address the challenges in their context. So our goal is to be working with you to ensure that we are helping you build your capacity within your school, not only in implementing a project, but also in the design, implementation, and evaluation. So from there, what we do know is that our intermediate outcomes of our projects are simultaneously benefits and also ingredients for our final results. We look at the challenges and we look at how they are addressed in each setting, and we know that that varies across the program and individually within each project. And being part of the Fair Education program also allows for a community of practice to help support these challenges. Core elements to this, as we said, are that we have then improved family and community engagement, and we're creating environments that are conducive to learning as well as to increasing family stakes in their children's educational outcomes. We're looking at increasing or have increased the school leadership capability, and this improves both administrative and educational outcomes while improving learning. And this will develop with your relationship with your coach and in the context of your projects within your own schools. Layered on top of that also is that community of practice, that opportunity to build and connect with others. Learning, sharing your learning and your approaches, not only within your schools and your school communities, but with other schools and other communities and staff. And this helps us to implement our project and also keeps them aligned with our fair education principles, usually ending in or ensuring that we have sustainable results.
All right, and I'll speak for a little bit. Thank you, Karen. So we're seeing a variety of projects that have used family and community engagement to improve student learning outcomes. Some of those are on the slide there. Some key learnings that we're seeing across the program after years of having them in different states is that the projects that engage families or the community through their student learning are the best projects to work to engage deep and meaningful learning conversations. You have 3 years in the Fair Education program to enact the project, and it's big, but like everything starts small and grow, and that's the same with engagement and community relationships, and so lower the threshold and grow as you develop those relationships. we're all learning, and in the Fair Education program, it's about learning, and this means that progress will not necessarily be linear. And so the program is designed to be flexible, and you'll need to be too. And we talk about investing in collaboration in the budget section in a little bit, but the most successful projects are ones that are engaging to use the funding to invest in their staffing or engagement with participation in the community of practice. They're not resource purchases, they're collaborative cultures and engagement opportunities. And the last one is, just understanding your stakeholders, both at the start of the project and as you move through. This allows you to, get that early and regular feedback and build on communication. And it helps with having clear project outcomes and the project challenges and the measurements of success. And so those are kind of 5 key trends that we're seeing through the program, and things to keep in mind when you start putting your application together. So successful projects, as discussed earlier, they're centered around learning, and the funding allocated is for learning opportunities. So when you're thinking about putting your budget together, I'd steer further away from having a specific event and the purchases of resources, and really investing in staffing and time to work together around those learning projects. We're really keen to support innovative projects that trial new designs, and so be expansive and creative in those thoughts, and strategies that are research-based and provide the opportunity for transformational change. And so one of the great parts is this is a 3-year project, so you can think really big about what change you want to see at your school. So we've got some family and community engagement resources that might help you later on in the slide, and so that you can have a little bit of read of those in the event that they are new to you. And for New South Wales schools, we know that your department schools, you're doing your school plans this year. This is an opportunity as well to be thinking about how this project can link in with your bigger key strategies. That will help with the sustainability, but also help with the reporting, and help be thinking about how this can embed into practice long term. And so those are other kind of key tips. The last one for members joining us today that are going to apply as a cluster of schools, we'd really like to encourage you to reflect on times that you've worked together previously, and that you can share with the panel, or you've had a successful project that you've done together as a cluster. That really helps us when we're selecting projects to know that you've had some successes, you've built the relationships, and you can build on that. So if a cluster school is selected for the next round of the interview stage, we will expect that each member of a cluster representative is there and is able to speak to it, because it is quite a lengthy time commitment that you all be working together. So we're just keen to hear how you have worked previously and how you plan to work together should you be successful in Fair Ed.
So 2020, a challenge for most people, I think for all people, but especially a challenge for schools. It's been unprecedented times, and one of the focuses that really aligns very well with the Fair Education program is the fact that COVID especially, and all schools pivoting into online or remote learning in some capacity, has had significant implications on parent, community, family engagement. We're actually going to take a moment just now for you to think about, and just pause for a minute, some of the things that may have been challenges, or maybe even silver linings, that have been thrown at you as a school in response to the events of 2020. For some of our schools in some of our regions, not only was it the bushfires at the end of 2019 leading into 2020, following that we also had floods in some regions, and then layering in on top of that, we then had the response to COVID. teaching, I was in that teaching space at the same time, pivoting into remote learning, and very, very aware of the challenges that schools faced, but also very mindful of the challenges, not just for the students, but also for staff and also for families. So we're just going to give you a couple of minutes at the moment to consider a couple of things. During this time, and I know we're all on a knife's edge at the moment, wondering if we're going to be pushed back into that space, probably a little bit more prepared than we were previously, but if we are, but in considering our engagement with families and communities in response to the events of 2020, how has that shaped or changed your views around family and community engagement? Have you been, as schools, provided with different opportunities? And what are some of those opportunities that you didn't envisage? Also, with those opportunities, what are some of the things that you could now consider leveraging in terms of building your capacity in this area in response to that? So I'm going to zip it just for a moment, give you a moment just to have a think. And then we invite you that if you do either, if you'd like to raise your hand in the chat, or if you'd like to put a question or a response in the chat, we're just going to spend about 5 or so, 5, maybe 10 minutes thinking and considering some of these, but also sharing our learnings as a basis to how you might develop a project in this area. So is there anyone who would like to share a learning, a moment, a challenge that they possibly have had in terms of family and community engagement throughout? Doesn't necessarily have to be in 2020, but it is a moment in time where we have definitely been pushed into that space for extra consideration.
If not, we can just continue along, gallop along to how to apply.
If you'd like to share it, if you're not wanting to speak, then you can share it in the chat and we can definitely share that with everyone as we go through. Okay, so I'm just going to share just quickly. We have one sharing in the chat. We had a lot of success with care groups during the COVID response. Students were allocated to a teacher who called home weekly. That's a consistent response that we've had from a number of schools, and that is something that parents have actually really responded well to. As teachers, we often respond by picking up the phone when there is a challenge with a student, but the feedback from that been a shift in terms of that respect and trust and wanting to know more about the overall well-being of students. Yes, and the next one, also due to our family context, our focus has moved from learning outcomes to well-being. But I think that shift with families and being able to engage families holistically in support of the child, not just to focus on learning outcomes, has been a really positive spin. So thank you for sharing.
So I've moved on to our slide.
Yep. All right. So Emma did mention just earlier that in regard to fair education, we have specific resources that we are able to access and provide some really helpful information in terms of your consideration about your project. But also, even if you do not go ahead with an application of project, these are very interesting resources that support the research that backs the importance of and community engagements within our schools. Our work with the RACI is ongoing. They are a credible and reliable research. The document itself is embedded with lots of information and provides the basis for a lot of the work that we're doing. There are some lighter pieces of research and resources there, but each of them will provide you with some insight that you might find helpful in terms of aligning your application with that area of parent and community engagement, or family and community engagement as well.
Okay, so I'll start speaking a little bit about the application process itself. Fair education, as we've identified, has two kind of key elements. One, the funding to enable the good work within the programs, and then the coaching. The individual school applications for funding receive $70,000 through the course of the 3 years, and $250,000 for cluster school projects. Now, I don't know how many people have gotten in and had a look at the application process itself, but the budget is only asking you for your first year of planning for the fair education. And so that for individual school projects is just the $30,000. For clusters, it's $100,000. Now, one of the unique aspects of this program is we very much acknowledge from the time where you're sitting here to when you start at the start of next year, let alone and further 2 years down the line, things are going to change in your school context, and what is best placed now might need to be flexible. So what we're looking for is that you can project what your plan is over 3 years, but we'll support you to better hone and develop your budget, through coaching, through your project development, through the course of the rest of the years. And so when you're thinking about your application, you're thinking about what's your big idea and how would you like to resource that for your first year. Okay, so we're just looking for 1 year of budget when you're putting in your application, and then with the support of the coach and as a collective project team, you can expand that further once you've commenced, should you be successful. We hope you're all successful. So in the application itself, there is a budget template. Budget resources should really be directed towards building capacity rather than a substantial allocation to material or concrete costs. Okay, that's something the panel is really going to be keeping an eye out for. And successful projects have included consideration for the resource costs for training and development. Some have had capacity to increase staffing or utilize relief for staff members in order to deliver the core objectives of the project. And so a little bit of details about how the funding will be used is really appreciated and helpful. And again, just remembering when you're forecasting, just for your first year, what you would like to be able to achieve for your first year. So the application itself, it's live on the Smarty Grants website. That's our granting website. You can preview the form before you get started. You can also download it, and we really recommend that because it's helpful to be able to, again, engage with your stakeholders, have a bit of a chat with your team before you get into the thick of it. There's 14 questions. There's a mix of kind of short answer. There's some multiple choice selections. There's a number of key stakeholder group questions, which I doubt anyone will just readily have at hand. So give yourself some time to kind of pull that data together for us. It's really helpful. And then there's the budget. And so, we've gone through that in a bit of detail. Really just make sure that your budget connects with what you're wanting to do, because that's a key part of, it's not just what you would like to do, but your budget's a bit of a driver for how you're going to do that. So hot tip there. And there's also the opportunity to have some program project design support with one of our coaches. If you want to chat through your big idea and have someone to bounce that off, very much available. It's about an hour. They'll call you, and we welcome that in advance. Just send an email through to the faireducation@schoolsplus.com.au. Yeah, no, .org.au. Apologies, apologies, everyone. We will push out a confirmation, and it's on the last slide. And I don't email myself a lot personally, but apologies for that. But yeah, please, please take up those services if you are so interested. So, and then galloping along, the round closes 11th of September, so you've got a little bit of time to be engaging and reflecting on it. Those that are shortlisted to the next round, as I referenced earlier, there's an interview that we have with the project team. That will be Karen and I that will ring. We usually have some follow-up questions. They're not surprised. We'll send them through in advance so that you guys can have a sense of what we're asking, but that allows us to be able to ask a few more questions. If there's any refinements in your application, you have a chance to go back in afterwards and make any updates. And then those interview transcripts go to the panel who select. So unsuccessful applicants, those that aren't funded this round, you'll know the outcome in November by email. And successful applicants, you'll know by term 4, end of term 4, before we break for the year, or you break for the year, and we'll be kicking off cohort 4, term 1, 2021, and that's when funding will come through. So yeah, as I said, the round is open now. Just some general tips. We've put together a guideline document that's quite helpful. It's robust. I'd encourage you to read it in advance. Again, as I said, you can preview the application or download it. Please link in for the project design support. We've never offered that at Schools Plus before. We're really keen to help help you put together the strongest application. And I know it's helpful to have someone to bounce ideas off. And so these are our coaches that are working with the program in general, and they'll be able to just help steer you and finalize your idea. And just a tip from last time, not everyone on the panel is going to be an educator. So just encourage you to be aware of your acronyms or your jargon. Just spell it out. If there's something specific, a program that's happening at your school that you know really well what that acronym stands for, it's very helpful for external people if you can spell that out for us. And yeah, your budget, just make sure your budget matches what you would like to do, because that is a clean way of knowing that it's a realistic goal that you're going to do. So how are you going to make that your big ideas happen? And we're happy to throw to the chat if people have any specific questions that we haven't covered, or if we can point you in any direction. So I'll just please feel free to unmute yourself, and I'll also pop over to the chat if people don't want to speak but want to add it into the chat questions.
There have been some really interesting additions to the chat and a number of additional resources that people have shared, which is wonderful. We will add those to our resources and share them with you when we have the webinar available. And so thank you for those people who have shared those as well. At this point, there's been additional feedback in terms of some of the silver linings that have come in regards to parent and community engagement, some of the challenges, sustaining some of that engagement that has come, that was developed during that period, now that families have handed back their students to the care of teachers and schools are operating in New South Wales at this point in time as they would usually, it has been a little bit of a challenge to sustain from reading some of the comments here. But it is important for you to consider that when you are looking at your project, as Emma has actually indicated, this is not a sprint. This is a relationship that we are going to develop with you, and you will develop with your coaches over a 3-year period. It is a journey. It is something that will continue to develop and expand over time. It will pivot in different places, and there will be opportunities to work with your coach around how you do that to ensure that you're getting the best opportunities for your family and community engagement, but also to improve the learning outcomes for your students. So just double checking if there is any questions that we may not have covered off yet in our discussions or our sharing with you. If you do have a question, you have the opportunity of either putting your hand up and having a chat with everybody, or if you'd like to just pop your question into the chat, we can open it up for everybody at this stage.
And thank you for adding those resources into the chat. That's really helpful. We'll include those. And we have recorded this, so it will go up on the website as well for future reference.
All right. So probably just again, if there is just looking at those key points, please use our guidelines and the application tools that are on the website. If you are unsure, or if you have a question that is related to your specific context or your individual school, please make contact with us, and either Emma or myself can have a conversation with you, or we can have a deeper conversation with one of our coaches that may assist you in thinking through and developing your ideas around your project as well.
I have thought of something I didn't mention. If you are interested in receiving that project design support with a coach, when you email through to the Fair Education at schoolsplus.org.au, can you please include just a brief paragraph about what you're interested in, so that the coach can kind of prepare before they have the conversation with you. So contact details as well, but also just a small scoping of what you're thinking is really helpful, so that when they call, you know, they can be best informed to assist you. Thank you.
Well, once again, we know it's the end of a long, busy day at schools, and even though we had an hour allocated, we do understand that it is the end of the day. So we do thank you for joining us, and we look forward to supporting you however we can as you consider and also put in your applications for your Fair Education project. So thank you once again.
Thank you for your time all.